Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Chilling Neigh Podcast, your premier VGC podcast. My name is Rashil, aka Konknong. I'm joined by Ryan Sableye VGC. What is up, man?
Absolutely nothing. Nothing happened this past weekend. Not like there was a major international or anything like that. We're just chilling. Nothing really to talk about. Just gonna have a good time today. So let's uh, let's go with that.
Yeah, nothing major happened. Just Wolf Glick winning his second international
Yeah,
championship, but like really kind of his fourth because he had like the national championships as well, and just further proving that he's like the GOAT by just a ridiculous margin.
yeah. It's kind of
But
crazy how
yeah,
consistent Wolf has been, though, eh?
it's insane, and he's been like going nuts in Scarlet Violet, especially. I feel like Sword and Shield was like, I mean, we didn't really have much of Sword and Shield, VGC, but I feel like he was not his best self during Sword and Shield VGC, and then he just Scarlet Violet. He has been going insane.
Does does this confirm my Dynamax bad theory?
I feel like everyone like Dynamax was definitely the worst mechanic we've had. I think.
Once I don't know. I don't want to hate on Dynamax too
Parts of
much,
it,
but
but I started playing VGC and Dynamax
yeah.
era, so I don't like hate it as much as everyone else does, but definitely like Terra better.
I
But
liked it from a non like super serious perspective, like haha Pokemon grow large, this is really really cool. But when you were trying to take the
yeah,
game seriously, it was pretty annoying. But anyways, let's stop getting sidetracked, I guess.
yeah, I know. I feel like we just started the pod with a Terra versus Dynamax debate, but okay. Well, we actually had EUIC this past weekend, and Wolf won with Perish Trap in a single restricted format, which is absurd, and he is still yet to lose a tournament when he brings Perish Trap, which is also just insane. Um, And yeah, so he won with Koraidon the week after I called Koraidon a fraud for like 20 minutes on the last week's pod. And so Koraidon finally gets a. I mean, I was corrected on Twitter. It technically had a Puerto Rico win 2024, but this was like its first major win that had more than 50 people in it.
Yep.
And so this was huge win for Wolf and for Koraidon. And you were there, and you had great run yourself. We were talking about it a bit, going 9-3, which is huge. So,
It was so
kind of
sad.
want to toss it to you a little bit and talk a little bit about kind of your experience. What was it like being there? Kind of yeah.
Okay.
How was UIC?
No, USC was great. Okay. Also, I do want to just point out that Wolf has once again won the largest tournament to date. It seems like
Yeah,
every time we're sitting at an event, it's like, oh, this is actually the largest tournament we've had to date. 2 hours later, Wolf just wins the tournament. Like, that's what it feels like. It's
yeah,
like every single time we have the largest tournament to date, it's Wolf's win, which is kind of just crazy when you think about it. But also, 1,257 Masters is like an insane number of players.
yeah. It's a lot.
Like,
It
I don't know. I feel like we needed another round somewhere in there.
yeah. It's pretty nuts. How many people end up getting CP? What was the cutoff? Like 512,
512
right?
got
Something like
CP, yeah. But
that's
what's
pretty
crazy
crazy.
is you could have gone 5-3 and like straight up got like 512, and that just feels bad. Like you went 5-3, that feels like it deserves a lot more than top 512. you know,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you
That's
basically
true.
could have lost your winning in today too, and then got top 512.
Yeah,
That
it's
doesn't
I feel
sound
like
right.
with these like huge tournaments, like they're so like I mean, we talked about it a little bit before we started recording, but like you were in part of the group where there was so many 9-3s that some got top 32, all the rest got top 64, and then there's just
11.
11 that got top 128, which is where you unfortunately fell. And like that's kind of where it was in each bracket, I feel like, where there was
Yeah,
just like if there's some players that just had a better record than what their placement kind of showed, like most of like, maybe the 6 and 2s got, top 120 or whatever, but some got top 256 or,
yeah,
however it shook out, which is kind of like an unfortunate part of the system slash also just what happens when there's like a billion players that
yeah.
come up to play VGC. But I also think it's kind of awesome that like there's all like just the growth of the game is super cool to
Oh,
see, and
absolutely.
like keep breaking these records of like, oh, the biggest tournament ever, the biggest tournament ever. Like, I mean, we know Wolf keeps winning them, but at least it's cool that we're having these like huge, tournaments that are happening. So, I love to see it. I think it's super super cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's fantastic because when I started playing this game, a regional, like a big regional for us was when we hit over 100. It was like, oh my goodness, we got like 114 people. This is awesome. This is such a big turnout. And now we're going to this EUIC stage this past weekend, and it was like I said earlier, over 1,200 players, and that's just something I could only dream of back in the day. So having the game grow to this level is amazing. Am I still gonna complain about being one of the 11 players that went 9-3 and then somehow missed top 64? Yeah, I am gonna complain about it, but I also think I have a right to complain about it. But I don't know. It's a little bit of a bittersweet ending overall. Like I feel like I had a very good run, a very controlled run. One of those runs where you don't get to say too often that you really don't regret many options after a set. Like I don't think I actually regret a single play I made all weekend, which is something that's rare, right? Like I'm sure if I went back and be like, what am I cooking in this exact turn here, I would be able to find it. But from a broad perspective, I don't see a line that like, wow, I wish I would have played this line instead of this line. I feel like I was on my game all weekend. Things unfortunately just didn't work out. I got a little unlucky versus Ibrahim in round 3. Ended up coming down to a Moonblast special attack drop, but hey, you know what? That's Pokemon. It was still a really good set. That was one of my losses, and then I played Michael Kelch in round 5. Felt like I was really on my game in this set as well. Ended up taking game 1, lost game 2 to a Sludge Bomb Poison, and then was kind of clawing back from a bad spot in game 3, and then just got Sludge Bomb Poisoned again anyways. So kind of felt a little rough, but like, once again, like it was still a really good set versus a really good player, so I don't have any complaints about that. However, it feels like that I was doing so well all weekend just to have it kind of ripped away from me. And then my day 2 loss as well. I missed 4 O-Pulses and got crit twice. Now I'm playing Kyogre. I'm going to miss 4 O-Pulses. It's Kyogre, right? That's something I signed off on when I said I'm going to bring Kyogre to this event. Still feels terrible. And then on top of all that, it's like, haha, we're going to hax you out in the tiebreakers as well. You're going to not get top 64. It was one of those ones where it's like one final slap in the face from the tournament, But
Yeah. Well, at least your take last week where you said you're gonna go 4-4, aged like milk, and that much I'm very happy for you. And we I think all of us listening knew that you were gonna have a great run. And we're glad to kind of see. And now you have in 2 weeks, right, or a week and a half,
yeah.
Vancouver, where we know you're gonna pop off, as that is the location of your last huge pop off.
Bro, I went
So
3-3 at Vancouver last year. I did lose to James Evans though at the 3-2 tables. I played James Evans, lost, and then he decided to pop off and win the tour. So
that's pretty crazy.
okay.
Well, I'm excited. So let's kind of dive into what's kind of happened here in the results of the tournament and kind of what it means for next week, for Vancouver. Also, crazy drop that Wolf mentioned in his interview is that basically he's won 3 straight major tournaments, because he won the global challenge,
Yeah.
as well with this Red on Parish team. It's kind of funny, like once I saw this, I was like, I don't know if it was him or someone else, but I'd like seen this team. I don't know if you had also seen it or not on like Showdown Ladder, like a few weeks ago. I'd like played it a couple times and I was like, oh, like lol, someone's trying to make Parish work in like
Yeah.
this format. Like that's funny. That's not gonna work.
Yep.
Like basically, I like saw these 6-1s, not thinking anything of it because it was like I wasn't
Yeah.
like too high on ladder. They weren't too high on ladder at the time, so could have been Wolf testing, could have been someone else. I don't know, but like it's just kind of crazy to see a team like this. But it's also funny to see like tournaments where Wolf wins with Perish Trap. It has like 0 impact on the meta because no one else knows how to play this team, and like no, like everyone else who tries to play this team is like terrible at it. So it just like
Yeah.
you can just ignore it basically going into Vancouver because no one's gonna know how to play this properly.
Yeah. I don't think you can straight up ignore it, but like I would definitely say look at it and go, do I think I have a matchup for this and just have a very basic game plan versus it and not really worry about it farther, as opposed to like a different team winning a tournament you probably should have a little bit more thought out lines into, just because it takes someone special like Wolf to actually play this team. Like, if I tried to pick this team up, I would lose 90% of the games I played, right? And it's just Wolf being on another level. I don't think the team itself is all that amazing. I do want to point out one thing, and that's Life Orb Close Combat on the Koraidon instead of running Collision Course. I think that is a very interesting take, and having the extra 20 base power actually does fix a lot of the issues that Koraidon has. So I'm curious to see if other Koraidon teams start adapting towards that iteration as opposed to just the collision course stuff. See if they actually start putting back onto close combat and see if that catches on anywhere else. Because that would be my biggest concern here. Right now, it's when I'm running Koraidon calcs, I have to run them versus close combat. Right, I'm not going to necessarily care too much about this exact Parish team, but in general, like Koraidon from a overall perspective, I feel like should probably start looking at close combat. I was looking at it going into the last global challenge. I ended up settling on Bandit Koraidon just because it was a lot funnier. But like close combat has a lot of extra calcs that are very, very consistent for Koraidon, and I think it's actually, I'm curious to see if it actually like bleeds onto any of the other teams into format.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because because Wolf's team has Goth, it's like very easy to
Yeah.
not very easy. Like we saw the Crydon get intimidated at times and stuff, but like it's easier to mitigate like okay, when can Instant switch in and get that intimidate off and you get a little bit more scared and but like there was several times on stream where you saw like close combat like either Oko or almost Oko or Maridon just like doing dumb damage to a lot of different mons. And another thing that I thought will have, I mean, like, again, I feel like Crydon winning may empower Crydon players, and maybe we'll like have some people like switch to Crydon. Although I still think it's not like, I mean, if we look at the results, there's Wolf in first place with Crydon.
And then
Where's the next Crydon?
22nd.
22nd. Which is, I mean, it's not bad at all, but like it's not, in the top 16. And then where's the next one? 45th, right? So like, it's not like it's this, I don't think it's going to be this overwhelmingly popular mon, but what I think it will have an impact is like Wolf was running max speed Koraidon,
Yeah.
and it was catching like CSR's off guard, Maridon's off guard, where there was like a stream match where like it looked like I was like, oh, Wolf's about to lose, like Astral Barrage is about to happen and clean the board and it's over. And Wolf's Koraidon outsped the CSR because the CSR wasn't max speed,
Yep.
Flare Blitz, O-Code, and that was game. That was pretty much wraps. So
Yep.
I think it will like, and Wolf's kind of consistently, he's very consistent that he wants to run fast mons fast. Like his world's team, he ran max speed Kali Shadow, even when a lot of Kali Shadows were being, maybe modest and bulkier. But he prioritized the speed, and same here where he prioritized the speed. So I think that's going to not only impact other Koraidon players, but I think what it's really going to do is now say, okay, like I have to run my Maridon maybe max speed now, or I have to run, Kali Shadow to at least outspeed max speed Koraidon, like just so that I don't get caught off guard by these things. And I think it's just gonna make everyone speed creep each other to the point where everyone's like running max speed restricteds and maybe running into those speed ties, which is gonna be pretty awkward. But I think that's something that will definitely have a real impact going into Vancouver.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about Amoonguss real quick because once again, this Pokemon is incredible. Obviously, it won the tournament with Wolf, got third as well. A couple more results coming off as well, but like it did fall off and somehow between like the 4th seed and like the 13th seed there was like none of them. But like after that, it picks right back up again, and it really is just a consistent Pokemon. And as a player that like brought Amoonguss myself, I hadn't brought Amoonguss in a while, but just having this Pokemon, it just made me feel like no matter what position I was in the board state, it's like if I had my Amoonguss, there was a chance. It's such a good answer, especially with the Rocky Helmet. to all like the Urshifus and stuff like that. You can do a bunch of other cool things with maybe like a Covert Cloak Amoonguss like we saw on the Tang team, right? And it's just time and time again, it's like despite the, oh, it's such a slow Pokemon, the metagame's getting really, really fast for it. It just continues to prove itself. And obviously we branched away from the restricteds there, but I had to give Amoonguss a shout out. Like it's just consistently, time and time again, one of those Pokemon that seemingly just keeps resisting the test of time. Like, by now, I feel like we would have had something new. Everybody was like, Ogerpon is the next big thing. And Amoonguss is still here, you know? And I don't know if it's going anywhere.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, like, yeah, Among Us is like one of the best mons of all time in VGC, so you can never ignore it. And Sport's just busted. I totally agree there. I have a question for you that I'm like actually looking through now, and I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Okay.
So for all of Scarlet and Violet leading up to the restricted formats, basically or I guess yeah, before the first Reg G, like the best mon in the format of all of Scarlet Violet was Fluttermane. Like Fluttermane pretty
Yep.
much dominated clearly. And then restricted came, and especially like the first time Reg G, I think like Fluttermane kind of fell off pretty hard. And it's curious. I'm curious what you think. Which Paradox Mon would you say is the better Mon right now? Fluttermane or Roaring Moon? Because I feel like Roaring Moon's also had this like real like Roaring Moon was never had the popularity that Fluttermane, like close to the
Mm-hmm.
popularity that Fluttermane has had through all of VGC, or like through all of VGC,
Yeah.
Scarlet Violet VGC. But now like Roaring Moon, especially in the restricted format, has like really found its niche. But Fluttermane has also kind of made some of a bit of a resurgence, not like a huge resurgence, but it's definitely like I mean it won obviously, but also came in third. You know, there's as you scroll down, you know, like 15th, and then there's like a few more. As you kind of scroll down more, so I'm curious, like, what your thoughts on Fluttermane versus Roaring Moon. Which one do you think is the better Paradox Mon right now?
The better Paradoxmon in general, in my opinion, is going to be Fluttermane. I think that's hands down, just based off of versatility. You can kind of always like throw a Fluttermane on a team, especially this booster energy set, the supportive one, even a focus set if you wanted to, like Wolf did. You can kind of just put that on a team in realistically any format, and you're going to have at least a piece that's functioning. It may not necessarily like fit perfectly with the team, but anytime you're clicking fast icy winds with the coverage of ghost and fairy types that you're going to get from the Fluttermane, it's going to at the very least be decent. It might not end up being the correct piece, but at least in testing it'll at least be something decent, right? Whereas Roaring Moon, it's a little bit more of that, like it kind of needs the right team, but if it gets that right team, I feel like it tends to be a little bit better. It also benefits a lot more from not necessarily needing to Terra consistently in the format. You do a lot of you get a lot of pressure out front. You play something like a Kali Shadow, especially those ones that are like leaning towards the Psychic and the Ghost move as opposed to the Terra Fairy Draining Kiss sets. You can kind of just sit there, make the game a 2v1, and you have your tailwind control to let your partner outpace the Calyrex. You have knockoff pressure into pretty much anything on the board, and fast knockoff, especially on some of those Kyogre teams, like the Oliver Escalin team. It's just stuff like that, and I don't know. I think Fluttermane is the more sloppable Pokemon. I can kind of just bring this onto my team, and it's probably going to function
Yeah.
fairly well. Whereas Roaring Moon, if positioned properly and gets put onto the right team and is supporting the right Pokemon, it's by far better, I think. But I think in terms of just like overall umbrella statement look, it's I would say Fluttermane because I do think they serve different purposes, right? Like one's a
Yeah,
physical, one's special. One has like kind of passive speed control with the icy wind. One's a little bit more aggressive with the tailwind, right? So they are fairly different Pokemon as well. I know it's a
yeah.
pretty obvious statement, but like, who would have thought they were two different Pokemon? Crazy.
Yeah,
But
yeah, they
no.
definitely serve different purposes and like are different ones, but I feel like they're both kind of used in a speed control sense a little
Yeah.
bit, or at least have like a lot of them are running the booster energy, or at least some way to activate that photosynthesis. Yeah, both of them are Protomons. And I like it's interesting seeing. I think both are kind of like not neither is a dominant mon right now, but both have like
Hmm.
found their like spots where it's like Roaring Moon really fits on like the Kyogre Kali Ice teams. Buttermane really fits on like the Sun teams or like Kali Ice teams and like some Kali Shadow teams here and there. So or Zom teams. So yeah, it's interesting, but I'm not used to seeing Roaring Moon and Fluttermane have similar usage, so it was kind of
Yeah.
as I was scrolling down, it was kind of interesting to see.
Yep.
Um,
Welcome back, Maridon. Yes, yes.
yeah, I was
What are
gonna
your
say
what are your thoughts here?
so we have four in top eight, and then yeah, I think another one in top 16. So,
Yeah.
um, we have a lot of Maridon and like so this time around, like ones in top eight, there's so the first one, got second obviously with Dill, with Iron Treads, which is interesting, but like again the similar build, right? Like it's five of the same six-ish. You kind of pick which Urshifu you want to run. Otherwise it's
Pick a
like
fire
the
type.
same kind of mons. And then yeah, pick your fire type, and then in fourth place, we have like the very standard
Yep.
the Arabiga Maridon team. And then we had sixth and seventh, which was like more like a screens bulkier. Like again, like still some of the same mons, but a little bit more variation. And Joe's kind of been on that like screens bulky Maridon
Hmm.
for quite a while now. Um, I think that like we've been saying, I feel like this has kind of been the theme of what we've been talking about since like we've been, we came back for Reg G, is that Maridon is there. It is never going away, like is never going away completely at all. Like it, and the second you think it is going away, where I think it was San Antonio, where it was like super like Maridon was nowhere, and it was a very Cali Ice heavy tournament, and right when that kind of stuff happens and everyone's just forgotten Maridon comes right back because it's just such a consistent team, it's such a consistent build, and choice specs, volt switch, being able to like pivot especially and just maybe KO things or do half health to things is
Yeah.
so ridiculous. Because it's so slippery, right? You want to try to get a hit down on the Maridon, just choice specs vol switches out, and now you got instant back in or whatever mon back in. So I think it's and I think that's the main takeaway, honestly, going into Vancouver versus like the Crydon Perisher build, where it's like,
Hmm.
okay, second place was Maridon. There's four in top eight. I think that's the one where it's like, okay, everyone's like, okay, dang, here we go again. Maridon's back, and so that's where we may see, and on the opposite side, I basically got all the, we were looking back at the predictions from last week. I said Kelch would win. You said Joe. You got a lot closer on that one than I did. I took the over on Cali Ice on top 16. I think like 3.5. There's two Cali Ice here.
Yep.
Where I think that's definitely going to be different in Vancouver. I think there's going to be a lot more Cali Ice now that Maridon's
Yeah.
done super well. And I mean, it even still has a good matchup into
Yeah.
Crydon as well. So, and then the stupid turtle got two placements in top 16, which I said it was going to get none when.
I love how we just
Um,
I love how we just all just like hate the turtle. Like I feel like there's nobody out there that like, oh yeah, the turtle's here. I could take him or leave him. I feel like you either absolutely love this guy or absolutely hate this guy. Like, and for no reason. Like, I'm just a hater. Like, I don't think it's good. I'm just a hater. I don't have proof to back this up. This turtle just sucks in my eyes. I feel like there's like two broad categories and there's like no in between. You either love the guy or
yeah,
hate the guy.
I agree, and I think the hate is always is much louder than the love. I don't see any like if you go on Twitter, like if you're on Pokemon Twitter, and if you're not, I recommend it because I think it's funny. But if you just go like if you're scrolling on the day to day, you'll see like people being like, "I'm Cali Shadow's strongest holder. Like I love Cali
Yeah.
Shadow. I obsessed with Cali Ice. Like the Cali Ice, like that's me. Love Cali Ice. Or like, oh, Maridon's the best. Like they're I never see anyone pining for Terapagos. Everyone's like, this thing is a wet noodle. Like, who, I don't know. The hate is genuinely, it's not even like it's done anything to me or it's like, oh, I just
Yeah.
consistently lose to Trop. I
Nah.
just think,
Just hate the guy.
I just don't, yeah, I just don't, because I think low key, like, cool design. Like,
Yeah.
it was a cool Mon edition, but like, it's just so, I don't know. Like, there's two in top 16, but then three total in top 32, and the third one is 32nd. I mean,
Yeah.
granted, it was Marco Silva, I mean, great player, but
Well,
like,
look at
that's how.
look at all three of the pilots. literally fantastic players. We
Oh
got
yeah, yeah.
Francesco Piopero,
Uh-huh.
who's the one who won the VR tournament with the exact team a couple weeks ago
Right.
that we were talking about. I believe it was the last episode in our preview. So that was cool to see him do well again. Giulio Tarlau, really, really great Italian player as well. That I believe started sparking up back in the Dynamax era there. And then, like you said, the other one being Marco. It's like this is just three really solid players to make this Pokemon
Yeah.
work. You know?
Agreed. And like, I think like veering away a little bit from the Tropicals, but something you said that like I think everyone really should pay attention to is like the VR tour was actually like significant in. I mean, like Dill got like I think you posted that or they posted that they got top 16 in like the last VR tour, like 10th or something like that. And then obviously like you were just saying, Francesco got first in that VR tour, and I mean both of them obviously did super well. So just another like I think some of these like bigger online tournaments can be super helpful into seeing like where like the top players because a lot of the top players play in them, and then they end up using like those teams, in the next biggest tour. Like it can be very helpful to like see, okay, what is being used, what do people like right now. But yeah, going back to Pagos, I still think it's going to be the Mon that's like
It's a fraud.
like it's gonna get some tough top placements because some of the top players will either use it trying to they get comfortable with a certain build of it. Like I think a lot of them were using the same. So two out of the three players were using like the same build, the Scream Tailed and Heatran,
Yeah.
and then there was another one build there. So I don't know. I don't think Pagos is gonna be like I would be shocked. I'd be like 10,000 to 1 odds that Pagos wins, Vancouver. I just do not see it winning. I mean, I would have put those odds same for Crydon winning
USC. But
USC, so, who
all right, all
knows?
right. So what you're saying is now that you've crashed Terrapagos, I've got about a week and a half to learn Terrapagos because it's more likely to win because you just said it won't.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see if my streak of being wrong will come to an end. I'm not sure. It was my predictions for UIC were rough. Um, Another like Mon that's kind of I feel like you and I have been talking about it for so long, and it just has not really seen the success at all since Reg G 2.0 has come back. But where's Zom been? Like Zom has not been
Yeah.
doing well like at all, like at any tournament. We keep predicting like, oh, this is the tournament.
This is the one. This
It
is the
it,
one.
it has not shown up like at all. I think the first one's here in 13th, and then not another one till 30th. Like so, two in top 32, and then still scrolling again far. Wow,
Yeah,
wow.
no.
Next one's 65th. So two in top 64, which is insane. Like why? Like
I
what do you think about
I
Zom and kind
I
of its
think we're
basic
starting
meta?
to see kind of a little bit of the Terrapagos effect where it just plays a little linear. And this was one of my big issues with Zam. It's like a very good mod inherently. There's no doubt in my mind this Pokemon is good. Right? Don't get me wrong for
Yeah.
what I'm about to say next because I feel like if I say this without this disclaimer, people are gonna be in the comments like, this come on. This is a better mod than that. Come on, Ryan. No, it's a very good mod. The problem is I feel like it suffers from itself. I know there was a meme going around with a Calyrex Shadow tweet earlier on, like the beginning of Reg G, like the first time we had the format, and they were like, Calyrex Shadow suffers from its own kit, right? And I feel like it's the
Yeah.
same thing here for Zamazenta, right? And like all joking aside, it's like, okay, you're gonna run body press, you're gonna run your steel move, you're gonna have wide guard, and you're gonna have protect. That is what you're doing with this restricted Pokemon, right?
Yep.
You pretty much once you have it on the field, you don't realistically want to switch it off as often as you would maybe want to switch off another Pokemon because you lose that immediate setup, you lose that body press, right? So Zamazenta paying a little bit for Zacian's sins from the past generation, but it's one of those ones where because of all these factors, it feels like the lines into Zamazenta get very similar, no matter what your team necessarily is, right? Like a lot of these teams are very different up top, but I'm pretty sure a lot of their game plans into Zamazenta don't differ. right? Now, obviously, I don't know their game plans into Zamazenta, right? But if you've got an Amoonguss and a Chi-Yu, or an Amoonguss and an Incin, you're probably bringing both of those to your Zamazenta matchup, right? That's just how you pilot versus this Pokemon. And there's not a lot of stuff that Zamazenta teams can necessarily do to modify that generalized game plan, right? Whereas if I'm prepping for Miraidon, and all of a sudden, the Urshifu has U-turn. Shout outs to Luca Cerabelli, because I do have to talk about that after. I think that was a really cool tech that doesn't actually get noticed here, but I'll talk about that later. Remind me. But anyways, and these little adjustments other teams can make that just make that matchup that I thought I had the line was this, but now the line can't be this. I don't think Zam actually has access to that because it's so restricted to doing what it needs to do every single time. And I think that's starting to hurt it. And we're starting to see just players be ready for that. And I think the results speak for themselves. Like I said, the one that did the best here was Rafe in top 16, and obviously had that different style. Not a lot of players. It was like the Tinglu Dozo, and then the Zamazenta, right? That's something that it can do to change that game plan. I think Zamazenta is a very good mon, but I think it needs something right now to kind of get away from that traditional style Zamazenta team. And maybe I'm wrong, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's so. I feel like the Zom teams are so heavily based on the partners carrying a lot of the load, especially against stuff like Miraidon and Kali Shadow, where you want to just be clicking there's the wide guard mind games, and if you're restricted to clicking wide guard, right, it's clearly not doing damage, right, and so you're kind of forced to have the partners be doing that heavy damage, and same against Miraidon, where it's okay, you're scared of Electro Drift, so then you might have to Terra into Terra Dragon, and then if they Volt Switch out, and now they can just Draco you. And so there's a lot of playing on the back foot against two of the top three restricteds, which I think can be pretty challenging. And so I still think the reason I believe that Zom will still see success is that the players that like it are so committed to it and so committed to making it work, and they're so talented. The players that play it are such strong players that I feel we're gonna see them figure it out and figure out how to make it work. But I just think it's not a restricted that's carrying you. You have to carry it more, and it's gonna take a lot more of that work against those top restricteds, where Miraidon, Kali Shadow, you could just click Astral Barrage, get a crit, and win the game on turn one. And even if not, you're just outspeeding, you're just clicking Astral Barrage more often, or clicking Volt Switch, clicking Electro Drift more often, and faster, than Zom gets to click Body Press, and especially if you Terra Ghost, now your biggest damage output is just done. Terra Ghost Incin is really not so great for Zom, so yeah, I think there's just some stuff that's pretty tricky for it. My faith in it over the past few weeks has mostly been predicated on the top players that are just so committed to it, like Michael Kelch. So I do think it will see success, but I think it is going to continue to struggle a bit.
Yeah, I think it just needs a shakeup, but I don't know what that shakeup is going to be. Like you said, I think some of those guys that are super, super committed to it will probably be eventually able to find it. I think the question is when. Yeah. Because there's not much Reg G left there's still a fair chunk. Obviously, we've got Vancouver, we've got Atlanta, at least from the North American perspective. I'm sure there's a few other ones that I'm missing in there outside other parts of the world as well. But when you really sit back and think about it, how quickly are they going to figure it out? If they don't figure it out till mid-March, how much success is it really going to see?
Yeah, no, definitely agree. All right, so you wanted to talk a little bit about Luca's team and some of his time, right? Yep.
I know Luca didn't have the tournament that I'm sure he would have wanted, but they still got 29th. So still a pretty good tournament if you ask me. But really, the one thing that I really wanted to point out here was the U-turn on the Urshifu. And this is what I was saying with the Zamazenta. It doesn't really have room to really mess with concepts. Right? Whereas I feel like the Urshifu can do so much with U-turn on the Maridon team, I think this was a very, very cool cook. And I think it's something that messed with a lot of game plans because what do you do when you play a Maridon? You try to position your grass types in front of it. You try to get your Rillaboom on the field. Now all of a sudden they go Maridon Urshifu and you try to bring in Rillaboom. They go Volt Switch U-turn. Your Rillaboom's taking 90 and they're back on the board with Electric Terrain on the same turn, right? So you've really
Yep.
effectively you haven't shut anything down, right? I think the addition of U-turn just for the positioning of the terrain is really something that I wanted to showcase and just shout out on the pod because it really is something that I had never considered, right? And these dedicated players, when you say this is my composition, and you sit down and goes, what's helping? You just showcases that these top players are really on that next level, right? I never would have thought about this. I'm gonna be honest. Um,
Yeah.
like I think I'm pretty decent at the game. When I want to be. This is just not something I don't think I ever think of. I probably would have said it and I would have been like, haha, I could U-turn with Urshifu and get back into my Maridon. And then I never would have just like pulled the trigger. It just would have sat in the bill and I would have, I don't need to do that. It's lame. But no, Luca came up with it and I think it's a cool cook.
Yeah, I agree, and I think like in that same kind of vein, I think Dill's team where he has like
Hmm.
they have Roar Frigraph,
Yeah.
which we saw on stream use, I thought was so cool because they locked in I think Draco on Miraidon, got that huge damage off, and then roared themselves out. So they reset the drop, now they have another mon, and so I think that was extremely cool. And then I mean obviously the Iron Treads, which we haven't really talked about yet, but steel like choice banded Iron Treads, which gets that speed boost in terrain, and now you have pressure into the Terra Fairy and Terra Ground or Terra Fairy slash like the Miraidon, even when it's normally just
Yeah.
electric type. So if you can force that Terra out early, now you have a Steel Roller or an Iron Head, Choice Banded Iron Head. That's just nuking Miraidon, or Choice Banded Steel Roller into something like a Rillaboom, something like that, where you want to keep that terrain up, and now you can't go for Grassy Glides, etc. Um, so I think that was super cool. And then the instant set is actually super interesting, where it's not AV, but it does have four attacking moves,
Yeah.
and instead of that parting shot, has U-turn, and it's Rocky Helmet, which I think is super interesting, and I'd love to hear more about why that choice was made. I think like there's I could speculate a little bit about like okay, you want to be caught against stuff like getting that damage down. I think is also a key, like you were talking about stuff like being able to chip Rillaboom while you're pivoting versus just getting that parting shot drop can be more beneficial on these like more aggressive teams. And same like maybe getting caught against like a clear amulet
Yeah.
mon where you still want to pivot, but now you can turn out instead.
Yeah.
So I think those kind of small techs on
Hmm.
this team that we've been talking about, that's like, oh, it's been figured out, it's the same six, and to an extent, you know that holds true in the sense of like there is the in the macro sense of like the team, it seems okay, like this is a fairly standard composition, but those minor changes, whether it's that
Exactly.
one mon or those one moves, I think clearly had a huge impact, and I think it's super cool to see kind of what choices get made there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What are your
Uh,
thoughts on moving forward here? We had not a lot to talk about, and we haven't really said much yet on the Calyrex Shadow. What are your
yeah.
generalized thoughts here? Because there's a fair amount of them sprinkled amongst this top 16, top 32. It had a good showing. So what do you
It
think?
did. It was a good tournament. It was a good tournament for Cali Shadow. I think this is. I think it's on the cusp. I think in the next couple tournaments it's gonna win. Like I think it's like you can. I feel like once you like kind of look at the patterns of especially Reg G tournaments, because it's so cyclical of like what like there's a little bit of that rock paper scissors format, right, where it's okay, what's the restricted on top, what's been popping up, okay, let me try to counter that and build my teams to be good into what's good. And so you can kind of see like usually when there's a mon that's doing well but hasn't done like isn't winning the tournament but is like doing clearly super well, but like I mean the Miraidon did here, but especially like the Kali Shadow too, where I think it's like okay, it's showing that like you said, only one in top eight, right, in eighth place, But then we have, how many? One, two, three, four top 16, and then another one 17th and 19th, 21st, 23rd. So there's, a ton in top 32 here. Oh, so
Hmm.
many in top 32 actually.
Yeah.
And you just keep scrolling down, and you keep seeing Cali Shadow. Like every other team, every second or third team is Cali Shadow. So I think it is primed for a really big performance where it gets either is in the finals. At least I think it's going to be happening pretty soon, um because it's like I think people have been working on it. It is such a strong mon. It is like the fastest mon, the strongest mon, right? Like it basically, and it has I think we've seen a lot of teams have had the double dark types and stuff that like just Fergraph on a lot of these teams where it's a normal type that is not so great for Cali Shadow. But now, like if you look at some of these teams, like okay, Wolf's team again doesn't has one dark type and then a couple mons that are like three mons that are weak to Astral Barrage, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Screamtail, Goth, and Fluttermane, and then I'm Crydon that doesn't love it, taking an Astral Barrage or Psychic, right? And same with Amoonguss. And then we keep going down. There's a lot of these Miraidon teams don't have the Dark Urshifu; they have the Water Urshifu. So then they have a couple Astral Barrage resistances or immunities, but I think people are starting to figure out what's the good partners for Cali Shadow. What are the good Terra types? People started to switch to Terra Dark to be better into opposing, or like like Kyle Livinghouse ran, Terra Ghost, Focus Sash, and just like immediate offense, right? And then James Evans here, what did they run? Terra Normal to be good into the mirror. So I think a lot of people are like really intentionally working on their Kali Shadow
Yeah.
builds, and I think it's gonna pay off really, really heavily soon.
I'm inclined to agree. Like it's like you said, it's one of the best mons in the format because it's the fastest and it hits like a truck. Like anytime I have that piece, like back when I was using Calyrex Shadow, because I was almost set on bringing Calyrex Shadow to this EUIC. Happy I didn't in the long run, but when I was testing it, it just felt like I always had a chance. No matter where the board state was, as long as I had this fast piece, that if I could chip enough stuff down, this Calyrex Shadow had a chance to win. If I could get to a spot where maybe I can all of a sudden get that nasty plot, get that calm mind, right? It felt like a puzzle the entire time I was using this Calyrex Shadow, and it was in and out, just trying to get to a spot where all of a sudden this Calyrex Shadow goes crazy. And I feel like you mentioned, we're seeing these players get to this point throughout the tournament now and get to this point on their teams. We see Clefairy creeping back into the metagame beside it. We saw the TU variant, I believe, on stream in top 32 there from Matt Maynard, right? But we've got, and then just James Evans variant is like really out there, really cool, right? Like that Tornadus rock pond mode is something that I don't think a lot of other teams are actually ready for, right? Now you have this rock pond and your Urshifu, and both of those are capable to take down those Insins, right? Which is something that I struggled with when I was playing Cali Shadow. And the question is now is, what do we consider enough building for Calyrex Shadow? Like, what is too far out there to support this guy? Because right now you're seeing a lot of these different iterations come out, and I wonder if we get something a lot more consistent out of these, or if it just kind of still, and we're gonna still be left grasping at straws just because of the fact that there are those, you're gonna have to play the Roaring Moon Incineroars. Is it just gonna be like matchup roulette and hope you don't hit that, or is there gonna be that build that is actually capable of surpassing that? Right, because that's where we're at right now, in my opinion. And then you also have, the ugly mirror. I don't remember who I was talking to this weekend, but they were saying that like it's like almost like a rock paper scissors when you do pull the mirror match. It's like the fairy ones with Draining Kiss beat the Terra Dark ones. The Terra Dark ones
Yep.
tend to beat the Terra Normal ones. The Terra Normal ones tend to beat the fairy ones. So it's kind of like that triangle of
Yeah.
super effectiveness there. That like it's kind of like you're playing mind games in the mirror. Whereas, like, I feel like with other restricteds, the mirror is just a mirror and it's going to be ugly. Whereas with Calyrex, I feel like you can actually do something in the mirror. But I also feel like that hurts the Calyrex in other matchups. Because, like, oh, I'm teching for
Yeah.
the mirror. But there's 7 other restricteds I've got to care about. right? Whereas
Yeah.
with other restricted, it's like, yeah, the mirror is gonna suck. Cause like I feel like everybody says that in the mirror, right? I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm a Kyogre player, and I just admitted to the fact that this mirror, I had my lines, but it was probably gonna suck. I wasn't gonna like change anything in case I played the Kyogre mirror. I think the Calyrex players are similar in that regard, where it's like, you know what, we'll just try to get our lances off in a little bit of a different fashion, maybe, you know, get an extra surging strikes, get an extra coaching in, but we're really not going to change much of the team concept here. Same with the Miraidon teams, right? It's like we're going to click Whimsicott Miraidon and just send it and see what happens, right? They're not changing their team to try and aid in the mirror, and that I think leaves more room for the other matchups. Whereas the Calyrex Shadow, in my opinion, they're changing their team for the mirror because they almost have to, right? You have to change your team for the mirror, and I feel like that at times does hurt you in other matchups as well. So it's weird. I'm like I said, like you said, someone's gonna find it, someone's gonna figure it out, someone's gonna crack this horse, um, and I am curious to how quickly that happens because we saw a lot of close attempts at EUIC, like Theo Time's team here. In I probably butchered that name, by the way, uh, but in top eight, really cool team. I thought they had a pretty good chance at beating Wolf as well in that matchup, but you know, Wolf is Wolf, so
Yeah, Wolf is crazy. I mean, we lucky to be able to live in a time where we got to see, Brady, Patrick Mahomes, LeBron and Wolf
and Wolf.
click,
Yep,
just it's insane.
it is crazy.
Master in his prime, but hopefully he leaves some worlds invites for other people. He's been I think this is like his like he's gonna have like 3 world invites technically, like 1 through CP and then like 2 through winning tournaments.
Yeah.
It's insane. Okay, well, looking forward to Vancouver. Let's because I think this is gonna be our kind of one episode before Vancouver, and then we'll do a recap. So
Yeah.
what's kind of your prediction slash where do you think Vancouver's headed in terms of which restricted's gonna come out on top?
Vancouver's tough because I feel like the West Coast always surprises me in terms of the team that does well. I feel like I genuinely always get that wrong. And I'm not saying this in like a negative way before someone's like, oh, this guy hates the West Coast. It just always surprises me in terms of what they end up bringing to their event because it feels like they just don't care about the rest of the metagame. You know, like we have like Europe that's like very balance based, and I think we can definitely see that based on this tournament, right? And then we have like the rest of North America that's kind of like this mix of like balance and then this mix of these hyper offense players. But I feel like West Coast always finds a way to throw that curveball in. No matter what event it is, it feels like there's always that curveball, that curveball team that's like I don't even know how to describe it that does well, right?
Like
And
when a guy just brings Corbinite and like gets second place at like in
yeah,
Vancouver, like that's
that
crazy.
guy's a scrub though. Don't worry about him. Um, but you know what I mean? Like I feel like there's always this one concept coming out of the
Yeah.
West Coast events that's just like such a curveball, such something that no one ever really expected that it's really hard to kind of predict accordingly or accurately, I should say. So like I don't know. It's the West Coast. I could see Terrapagos randomly popping off and winning. I could see this being Zamazenta's event. You know, if I had to hinge my
Yeah.
bets, I think it's a Calyrex Shadow Day. North America tends to be a little bit more aggressive, and I think a more aggressive Calyrex Shadow build could absolutely take over this metagame. But you also have to keep an eye on what I think is very cool adaptation that we talked about earlier a bit, and it's the Grimmsnarl Miraidon stuff. I do think that there's something there. I know it didn't win EUIC, but I think given the nature of North American style events with being a little bit more kind of all over the place, I think having a Pokemon that can do incredible amounts of damage and having screens to make it take less damage just feels like a really good call going into that event. So if I'm not cooking with that, I'm definitely keeping an eye on my matchup versus stuff like that going into EUIC. I just think there's potential there, right? And that would be my call. So I think I'm gonna go with. I think I'm gonna go Cali Shadows winning the event, and I think Miraidon screens as well is also gonna have a very good showing. That's what I'm going for Vancouver.
All right. All right. So I kind of think similar. So I spent this whole time hyping up Kelly Shadow. But I'm gonna say so I agree in one thing. So first, before I go into it, I want to highlight Joe's team because I think it's super cool. It's like Terra Poison Swords Dance Urshifu, which I think like when I saw, I didn't see I was like tuned in at one point to EUIC. Joe was on stream, and I was like, I hadn't seen the team sheet or whatever part of it. I just like tuned in. I saw like Urshifu go for Swords Dance at one point. I was like, what is happening? This is insane. But I thought that was super cool.
Yeah.
And then the Volcarona and the screens and then Ditto. So super cool team. I think if Screens Maradon wins, it's gonna be Joe. I think Joe has
That's
like
fair.
if he's going like, which I think he probably will. And if it does well, I think it's good. Like I could see Joe winning the event with this.
Yeah.
He had a great showing at UIC. He's been kind of grinding Screens Maradon for forever, and it's a strong team. If it wins, I think it'll be him, and I think he has a pretty decent shot at winning. But I'm going to say, and like because so, if it was just a normal like if this regional was in the middle of the country or something, or wherever, I would have said Cali Shadow as well. But because, like you said, like West Coast is a little odd, and I think they're gonna cook something up. I think Cali Ice is gonna win. I think
Okay.
like like it's nowhere in UIC, and I feel like it's probably a bad bet anywhere else. But I feel like it's just I don't know. I think with the Maridon doing super well, with I mean Maridon, winning, I think people will have their text into Cali Shadow. I think Cali Shadow is going to do really well, but I think someone's going to cook a new Cali Ice team and do really well with it. And so I'm gonna say Cali Ice wins. I wouldn't necessarily say it'd be the favorite to win, but it's the bet that I'd
Okay.
put down. I think if not, it'll be Joe winning with the Screens Maridon
That's
team.
fair. So my
And Cali Shadow does really well throughout.
I do have another question for you now. Do you think we're at the point where people are forgetting about Cali Ice again? Do we think we're at the point where people are going to stop prepping for it as hard? Do you think people are going to start leaning towards other matchups already? Or do we think that, like, people are still keeping an eye on this Pokemon? Because, like, frankly, I think it's good enough mod and it's proven itself in the past that, like, you need to have a matchup versus it. I just don't know if we're at the point yet where it's like people are gonna like, oh yeah, Kelly Ice, my matchup's probably fine. I think it's still gonna be very good, and you just think it's gonna overcome that, or do you think people are gonna forget and it's just gonna sneak its way back in?
Yeah, no, I don't think like if you're going to a tournament, if anyone's going to any tournament not thinking about Cali Shadow, Cali Ice, and Rhydon, which is like consistently the top three, and it was the top three in
Yeah.
usage, day one and day two at UIC two, like I think you're just throwing. So I don't think it's gonna be like people are like forgetting about Cali Ice, but what I do think is like there's always like a minor tech or a minor like little build here and there that like people aren't ready for maybe a specific comp of Cali
That's fair.
Ice or specific
Yep.
comp of Cali Shadow. So, for example, like people weren't ready for maybe Terra Fairy, Cali Ice with Roaring Moon. When the Tangs did super well with it, um, and so I think it's never and because Cali Ice because the Maridon for example, we know 4 or 5 of the same six every like almost every team has, right? So it's when you're prepping into Maridon, you're like, all right, most of the time I'm prepping into Arbega. Maridon, obviously the screens version of it throws a wrench in it, and so that changes things up, and that can make it do really well. But a lot of times you're prepping into the same kind of versions of the
Hmm.
team. Cali Shadow similar has like two-ish kinds of builds where it's more like one more tailwind offensive, one setup, fake out cycling, follow me with Clef or Amoonguss or something, and setup and sweep. Cali Ice I feel like has a lot of room to play with, where there's a lot of partners that can have a lot of different ways you can go. Like, you know, again, the Tangs ran, really fast Cali Ice. You can go like super slow mid speed Cali Ice, somewhere in between. You can run it with Amoonguss, you can run it with, the Ogre Pawns and etc. So I think there's a lot of ways to run Cali Ice, and I think people won't be ready for maybe someone's specific build of Cali Ice with its partners versus or maybe like a certain Terra, etc. I know Patrick Connors ran Terra Poison in Puerto Rico and got top four there and did really well. So I think there's going to be those specific
Okay.
little partner changes that I think people won't be ready for.
Okay. That's fair. I like that call. That's a good shout. Kyogre is also an interesting call for me because once again, it's still not really having that showing that I think it's deserving of having. Right? Gavin came close here in EUIC with a really cool cook with the Tornogre Iron Hand stuff, but I wouldn't mind seeing like a wild card Kyogre call, saying the Kyogre's gonna have a pretty good run as well. But it'll be interesting. I'm actually super curious to see what happens.
Yeah. West Coast regionals always have like some really fun wacky
Yeah.
picks that come out of it. So I'm very excited. I mean, there's the hard trick room committed players that I'm sure will show up and have a big showing. I don't know if, Brian Collins or Chef are going to Vancouver, but if they do, I'm sure they'll have a really cool cook that they'll do well with. I'm sure there'll be Dozo there, Wheezing Dozo or something like that. So there's gonna be
Yeah.
a lot of different teams. I'm very excited to see what happens, but and we may see some cool picks from the global challenge this week that
Oh right.
end up doing well. Like,
Bro, why
that
did you remind me about the global challenge? I'm having a good time. We're talking about EUIC. We're talking about Vancouver, and then they just like, oh yeah, there's a global challenge this weekend. Why do you got to do that to me?
We found out that Wolf is out here winning global challenges. You got to pay attention to what's happening.
No, I'm not saying you don't have to pay attention. I just wish I could like not have to play 45 games of best of one close team sheet Reg G. But hey, that might just be me.
Yeah, I'm bringing another degenerate team to this one. Let's see if I can do something with it. But
Well,
I'm excited to see. I'm excited to induce rage in myself and just be annoyed all weekend. That's gonna be great.
I'm very excited to lose all my confidence by playing the
Yeah,
GC and then having to go to Vancouver the week after. That'll be fun.
it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, I see no issues.
Well,
What could go wrong?
what could go wrong? Like I love the timing of these events where it's just like, all right, let's destroy everyone's confidence with the GC and then have a major regional. It's
Yeah,
it's perfect.
no issues.
All right, well, that's it for us. Catch us at, well, not catch us, but catch us after Vancouver. But everyone root for Ryan at Vancouver.
Also, say hi.
He
Say hi.
Yes, definitely.
I promise I'm not a scary guy.
Super excited to see how you do and talk about Vancouver afterwards, and hopefully talk about our successful GC runs and
Yeah.
and not rage-inducing GC runs.
Yep.
But hope everyone has a great global challenge run, does well at Vancouver, and excited to catch you all afterwards. So, yep, thank you as always for listening, and we'll catch you in a couple weeks.
See you guys.